Hi everyone, it's Lisa. I'm back with a card project today which is going to be focusing on night skies and also some Copic colouring. I've chosen to use the set called Kitsch Christmas from Avery L, which came out last year because I really like the size of the two deer images. I think they're great for Copic colouring. So I'm going to start off by just preparing a card base which is 11 by 8.5 inches and it's scored at 4.25 inches. It's a top fold horizontal card. I'm masking off the edges so that I don't blend right until the edge. And I've picked three colours for the night sky: Blueprint Sketch, Chipped Sapphire and Black Soot. And really you can just use whatever you have on hand. I love Blueprint Sketch because I think it's a really lovely bright royal blue, and you'll see when I start to add the layers that you can really see the depth of colour that you get with all three of the colours blended together. So I start by just adding on a layer of Blueprint Sketch. It's really imperfect blending. It doesn't matter what it looks like because you're going to be putting layers over the top and you're not going to see all of it in the end anyway. So the point here is to just lay down a load of colour to just try and build up the layers. And now I'm going to go in with some Chipped Sapphire, and you can see when I start to add this, it really does make a difference to the sort of brightness, I think, of the blue and the depth of the blue that you get. Again, it's not perfect blending. I've got some splotches on there, but you won't see them in the end, so it really doesn't matter. And then I finish it off by just going around with a little bit of Black Soot because, you know, the night sky is not perfect, so you don't want a perfect blend. It has different colours in it. And actually looks really nice if you add purple in, but I haven't done purple today. So I'm just adding some water droplets here just to add a little bit more interest to the panel. I flick it onto the distress background and then just lift it with a towel. And then the final part of this is just to add some white splatters on, and I'm using some white gouache paint, which I'm loosening up with some water, and then I just flick it off the edges of my acrylic block, and it just looks like little stars, and they're very random, and it just looks like a really sort of pretty finishing touch to the panel. So going into the Copic colouring, I'm stamping the two deer onto some Nina Solar White, and I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black as that's Copic friendly. And I actually double stamp my images. They did stamp well first time, but I'm double stamping just to make sure that I get a really crisp image. And what I'll do here is colour in relative slow speed for the first deer, and then I'll speed it up on the second deer so that you can see what I'm doing. My Copic colouring is by no means perfect. This is just how I've chosen to colour these two deer. There's so many different ways you can colour. It really depends on your preference, the size of image that you have, how much ink you want to put down on your paper. But today I'm going to mostly start doing with a kind of dark to light colouring. But what I do initially is lay down my lightest colour just to sort of saturate the paper really. And I used E51 for my lightest colour. I'll have all these listed over on my blog so that you don't have to write them down or remember them. And I just use a little bit of E53 just to start working out where the shadows are. I haven't been prescriptive about the light source. I've kind of thought that it's coming from the top right, but it's not definitive. And I really think sometimes you just want to colour because you just want to colour an image really. You don't want to spend ages working out where the light is, where your shadows should be. So once I'd laid the first two colours down, the E51, E53, I then decided that I would go in with my dark colour. I don't want to end up with loads of bleeding, even though I'm going to be cutting these out. Because the legs are quite small, if you lay too much colour down, there is a danger that if you were stamping this directly onto your final panel, you would end up bleeding outside of the lines. But I started with my dark, and which was E57, and I'm just going in and adding a little bit of E55 around that. And I take E53, so I'm just using all the 4 colours within the same kind of blending group and making sure that I blend from each colour to the next and still leave a highlight. And I finish off with E51, and I just go back over the whole image with E51, really just to blend all the colours together. It's not probably the best way of doing it. It's the way that I've chosen to do this image today, but I think that it ends up looking really nice, and it looks like the deer is rounded, even though I haven't worried too much about where the light is. And I think the final thing for me when I'm colouring, somebody actually asked me how I get the depth of colour, and what I do after I've done my first kind of run through of either 3 or 4 colours, I go back and I add in my darker colour again. So you'll see that I added in E57 there, and just to go back into those shadow areas, it really does make a bit of a difference to your final image. And I blended it out with E57, E55 and then E53, and finishing off with E51 again, but most of the work was done on the first layer. So then what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of pink into the ear here, and just so it doesn't go on really bright, I've added some colourless blender into the ear just to add some wetness to that part before I add the R20 in, so it gives it a little bit of a softer effect. Okay, so moving on to the second image, I'm going to add some music. I'm going to play some music here, and you can just watch me colour this one. The process is pretty much the same. I lay a layer of light on first, and then I go in with my darker colours back down to the light, and then I redo that at the end. So I'll put the music on and I will be back at the end to take you through the rest of the card. So that comes to the end of the colouring, and I fussy cut the deer out and just showing you the final image of them there. Now I'm going to prepare my aperture panel, and I'm using a die from My Favourite Things. I think it's called the Stitched Arch, and I've used the largest of the dies here. And I've added some double-sided foam tape onto the back because I'm just going to pop that over my night sky, which has now dried. So it's always easier than it looks trying to line it up. And I actually did get a few smudges from my inky fingers on my panels. So I'm using the Tombow Mono, I think it's Tombow Mono Sand Eraser, which is fantastic for removing ink from your panel. Only a couple of pounds, are really worth getting. And then as it's a Christmas card, I thought I would add a little bit of sparkle around the arch, and I've used some Stardust stickles from Ranger. And I'm just adding a little thin layer around the arch of the panel, and I'm just going to leave that to dry. To finish off my images, I've taken a Memento dual marker, it's Tuxedo Black, and I'm just colouring around the edges of the image so that you don't see any white from the cardstock. And it's really important to do this mostly from the back of the image in case your marker slips and you get pen down the front, which is what I did yesterday. So I mostly do that from the back, but I was just tidying up the front of the image at the end there. And then I'm adding some foam tape onto the top part of the deer and just some wet adhesive onto the bottom, because the top part is needs to be propped up and the feet don't, because they actually sit directly onto the panel. So I do that with both of the deer. And I just set about positioning them where I think they look best, sort of over towards the right hand side. I really love how they ended up. I think the colours look great against the night sky. So really happy with the card at this point. I'm just actually gluing down that little bit of the back foot because I had to cut there just to fussy cut in between the legs. So little trick just to reattach it back down to the base. I'm stamping my sentiment, which is from Studio Calico. I'm using Festive Berries and I fussy cut that out. I'm not sure if that stamp set is available anymore. It's called Christmas, but I had it a while, so you may not be able to get that now. I'm just adding some foam tape onto the bottom right of it and some wet adhesive onto the top left so that I can pop it onto the panel. And then my final touch is to use a black glaze pen to just go over the hooves, the eyes and the nose of the deer. It's a really lovely shiny black and it looks lovely on animals. And then I'm using my white jelly roll pen just to go over the dots on their back. And lastly, some Wink of Stella onto the ears and their tummies. So that finishes my card for today. I hope that you've enjoyed the process of the sky and the colouring. Thank you so much for watching. All supplies will be listed on my blog and I will be back soon with another project. Bye for now.